you've got some stuff today that I know you're here to share. So what have you learned, and where is this actually at? And really, let's start with, how real do you think this threat is, or this flirtation, whatever you want to call it, with Northwest Indiana?
Yeah, I'm working on a column right now, and the main gist of that column is that this is real. I mean, there is a reason. I thought there were two really important lines in that letter. There was 604 words in that letter from Kevin Warren yesterday. 5 of them really stood out, probably got the most attention, and that is, this is not a leverage play. The reason that was put in, of course, there was some leverage to this, obviously. If this wakes up Illinois and Governor Pritzker and they pass the legislation needed to get tax certainty and they'll start construction ASAP, that is always a possibility. And there is a chance that by taking Indiana seriously, that ends up being the outcome of this. So leverage could be a part of it. But it has been communicated to me very clearly, not just in the last 24 hours. But guys, there's a reason why I said it on our show, I think over a month ago, that you're going to hear the phrase Northwest Indiana. And the reason for that is because the Bears have really been backed into a corner here. They cannot get the loans they need to start construction until they get that tax certainty. And they have now gone through both the spring session and the fall veto session without even a vote happening. And so they're really kind of backed into a corner here. For the governor to come out and say that this is just not going to be a priority in 2026, which was the other important sentence in that letter that Kevin Warren wrote yesterday, is somewhat stunning. Like, to just take it off the table ahead of time, it really left the Bears with no other choice but to look next door to Indiana, where they can do this in the order that it probably should have been done in Arlington Heights, which is, instead of buying the land first and trying to get the legislation done, the legislation's already done in Indiana. The governor's already opening up his arms, and they just got to find the land now. They do it in reverse order, and as soon as that land is purchased, they can start construction. And all of those things, plus plenty more we can get into here, really, I think, puts the ball back in the court for Illinois to get their blank together, or they are going to lose the Bears to Indiana. Like, it will happen at this point if the state does not make a sudden pivot here and change their tune in 2026.
So you mentioned tax certainty as a part of what you just said, and I get annoyed with that, and I think a lot of Bears fans or just Illinois residents do too, because I don't have tax certainty. I own property. My taxes just went up. I puked. It was nauseating. This state has done a horrendous job fiscally, being responsible for decade upon decade. I'll get into that in my rant on this at some point in the show. But so I don't necessarily think they deserve it, but they are the Bears, so they're not me or you. There's a huge difference there. Why do you think it matters so much to a $6 billion, $9 billion, $10 billion company that this tax certainty? Because who cares if you're paying an extra $100,000, $300,000? It's not something they couldn't afford, but they've been hell bent on getting it.
Right. And so taking the issue of fairness out of it, because I totally understand that and feel the same way when it comes to the taxes we shell out in Lincolnshire and beautiful Vernon Hills. The reality, though, is they're not going to get the financing they need to start construction without it, because there's just too much unknown from a tax standpoint going forward, and rising costs and all this stuff that everybody else deals with. They're not going to get that financing. So then the next question being, well, how come an organization worth $8 whatever billion they are now needs financing? Well, we've been down that road before. The Bears are not. This is not Jerry Jones. This is not the Walmart group that owns the Broncos. They're a family-owned business that very little of that value is liquid. Okay, so it and not to mention that any billion-dollar corporation is still going to do the exact same thing and make fiscally responsible decisions. And the Bears will not be the first billion-dollar company to jump across the border to Wisconsin or Indiana in this state's history. So it's a different world than us talking about our house's property tax. And it's also not uncommon for mega projects like this to not have to pay any tax whatsoever. And so that's where it's just they're operating in a different world. And the reality is, whether people understand it or not, this project really can't go forward without this legislation, which is what Kevin Warren said in August to us here at Hallis Hall. He said, if we do not get this legislation passed, we cannot move forward. That's where we're at now, because it didn't get passed despite his efforts on that Fox preseason game and the interviews. All of that fell on deaf ears, and this thing just disappeared basically without a whimper in October in the fall veto session.
Hit the like button for Hoge. He's creeping on Johns. We need about 80 more likes. And by the way, the Bears don't pay taxes right now in Soldier Field because that is a publicly owned facility. This would change that. Gregory, we get in here.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a resident of Northwest Indiana, born and raised in Crown Point, and this whole thing kind of, I mean, I understand why they are looking at Northwest Indiana. I understand why they'd be used as leverage. Indiana is a financially stable state. No state is perfect in that regard, but they're actually pretty successful with some of the different businesses that have come to the state of Indiana. I also know that, in terms of the politicians of Indiana, I think they're going to work a little more with the Bears versus what they've dealt with in Illinois, more than likely. I know Thomas McDermott, the mayor of Hammond, is a guy that wheels and deals, and so he definitely feels like the wild card type. He literally last night changed his profile picture on Facebook to him at a Bears game in a Bears jersey, and then put on Facebook, he goes, sometimes the folks making the most noise have the least to say. So if you don't hear me shouting about it, just know I'm doing whatever I can to make sure that if the Bears choose Northwest Indiana as their next location, that Hammond will be their choice. So, I already see how Northwest Indiana is sharpening their knives. I've built houses in Northwest Indiana for 20 years, and I'll tell you, it's not just the Bears from Illinois coming to Illinois. It's a lot of residents coming over for the cheaper taxes and the easier pay of living and still being able to commute to Chicago, whereas now the Bears are trying to do this as well. My biggest thing, Hoge, is if I'm Arlington Heights or I'm Illinois, I'm still calling George's bluff. Kevin can be the one in the business of operations. I think, how what the tell is, Hoge, in my opinion? Then why wasn't Wisconsin also brought up in this? Why not start a bidding war between the three states if you really wanted to have the ultimate leverage? You know why? Because if he put out the week of Bears-Packers that we're also considering Wisconsin, I would be driving to Hallis Hall right now. So that's how I know this is a bluff. He ain't moving. George McCaskey isn't moving the Bears to Indiana. I understand the leverage or the seriousness of the situation. If I'm Illinois, I'm calling their bluff.
Well, that's fine, but I was told by a very reliable source that this Northwest Indiana was not going to be mentioned until George McCaskey was on board. And what happened last month with, by the way, that letter does not get sent out yesterday without George McCaskey's blessing and him signing off on this. And he was not, from what I understand, he was not willing to go down this road until he was actually prepared to move to Indiana. And that's where this is why this has to be taken seriously. And you've actually hit the nail on the head here on why this is serious. I mean, you can call the bluff all you want, but this has gotten to the point where for Governor Pritzker last month to tell them that this is just not going to be a priority in 2026, that was the final straw. It really just backed the Bears into a corner, and that this is the play that has to be made. Now, again, that does not mean this is like 100% happening, but I do believe that this is way more than a bluff. It just has to be when you really lay out all the facts and what is actually politically and financially possible in Illinois right now.
Yeah, it certainly is interesting. Go ahead, Carm.
No, listen, and with all due respect to the state that you live in, let's not blow up Indiana as I'm seeing in the chat, as some like it's ranked in the U.S. right now 40th in economy, 33rd in fiscal stability, 35th in healthcare, 50th in natural environment. This is not like they're moving to some pristine land. But go ahead.
It doesn't really matter because all that stuff's great. But as Greg knows, that part of the state is basically Chicago, and but without all the political barriers that come with being on the Illinois side of the border. And this is like the perfect example of that. And by the way, it's very easy to say nobody wants to go to Northwest Indiana. I'll tell you right now, if they make this move, you won't see me at a CHGO tailgate when I have to get back to CHGO Studios downtown. I'm just mainly joking when I say that part. But guess what?
Worry,
nobody
our
wants to.
Studios will be in Northwest Indiana.
Nobody wants to go to Green Bay either. There's nothing there except for Lambeau Field. So you build the stadium, you put a team people still care about there, and they're still gonna show up even if they don't want to. And so that's just the facts. No one goes to Green Bay except for Packer game. And nobody would go to Hammond or wherever they're going to build this thing other than the people that live there, except for the Bears. And it'll still work because it's the NFL and it's the Chicago Bears.
I agree. Any Bears fan out there that's like, I'll never root for the Bears again. Well, you are in the very small minority, and I hate saying that because I respect anyone's passion about this and how upset they'd be. We were talking about it before. They are quite literally the pride and joy of Illinois. And if they were to move out of Illinois, it would be a slap in the face to all Bears fans. This isn't about money to us. We don't care about what money the Bears do or don't have. We don't care about what money the state does or doesn't have, just in terms of a sports lens. If you live in Illinois, if you live in Indiana, I understand this greatly affects you. But just in terms of trying to figure a deal out, we don't care about that whole point. The Bears should stay in Illinois because that's where they belong. If they end up in Indiana, it's going to be a slap in the face to all Bears fans. That's speaking from somebody that they're talking about building it right down the street from my house.
Which would be great for you, but I get your loyalty to the Bears and this city where you work and make money and everything, that the Bears belong here, which is where
I love Chicago.
Right,
I want them to stay on the lakefront if they can figure it out, but the reality is I know they can't. And we went to a dumb town hall meeting 4 years ago, and that looked like a really good idea, and it's just ridiculous to me that we've gotten to this point, and Buffalo's already got a stadium. Tennessee's already got a stadium. What is going on?
So, that point of it, in the Trib piece on this, it's very interesting. The Bears met with Tony Preckwinkle last week talking about the Michael Reese site again. These conversations with Chicago are actually still like recent conversations, which is why Preckwinkle and J.B. Pritzker are saying they're stunned by this, which I'm like, how are you stunned by this when you're treating them like they are? But I did not realize that they were having meetings as recently as last week. Were you surprised by that, Hoge? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I actually didn't know that until you just said that because I've been buried in so I don't know what those guys have said today. But I will say this, that surprises me because as I've reported on the show before, the Michael Reese site has basically been ruled out as a possible Super Bowl site. People don't understand, to host a Super Bowl, you have to have a lot of land and space around a stadium just from a security standpoint, a security perimeter. And the NFL's involved in all this stuff, right? Like, and they're frustrated too, from what I understand. This is, there are stadiums going up in Buffalo and Nashville and Cleveland's coming and DC's coming, and they're the Jacksonville renovation, and all these stadiums are being done with far less commitment from the teams than what the Bears are offering to fund their stadium. And so the NFL's frustrated with the state of Illinois too, because they're like, well, if we can get all these other ones and the Bears are offering more money, what the hell is the holdup here? So I totally get it. And that's where, like, maybe it's coming off like I am just completely defending the Bears. Don't get me wrong. I think that they've made mistakes along the way. I think they wasted a whole year, in my opinion, 2024, flirting with the city when that was never going to happen. And it cost them time. Cost them money. And honestly, it might have cost them the political window that was open to get the legislation done in Arlington Heights that they needed. And now it's seemingly closed. And so that mistake, that might be the biggest blunder in all of this. But that being said, the Bears have gone into this thing willing to do business. They don't owe anything on Soldier Field anymore. The state does. The Bears paid off their debt, and yet they're willing to pay it off to give something back to the city to move to Arlington Heights. If they go to Indiana, that's out the door. The only thing that they're going to have to pay is the whatever cost there is to break the lease. And by the way, the Chicago Park District hasn't exactly been holding up their end of that lease over the last decade. So they might take that to court too. And I bet you that would come down to a settlement. Like, the Bears, in my opinion, while they've made mistakes, have come to the negotiating table with and been more than fair with some of this stuff. And it's just been a complete roadblock from the state of Illinois. And I get that they're viewing a lot of different eyes as we have bigger things to worry about than building another massive stadium. I get that point of view too. But this has gotten to the point now where that stadium might get built across the border in Indiana.